You know, I had a whole first draft of this breakdown written and recorded. I stepped away halfway through, and by the time I got back, I realized I had a totally different set of things to say about The Acolyte, Episode 6. I was going to say that no self-respecting cat lady is going to watch this show, but that's not true. Plenty of cat ladies will watch this show, and I have no reason to accuse them of self-disrespect just for seeking out a little man candy, as is their way. I had to get real. I'm a divorced woman in her mid-40s who crochets and watches Russell Crowe movies on repeat. All I'm missing is the cats.
Woo! Hang on to your husbands, girls.
It would not behoove me to throw women of my ilk under the bus for a cheap dig at this Acolyte thirst trap situation. And after reading this stunning article from Collider, it's clear that Leslye Headland has put a great amount of thought and effort into this part of the production. Also, a commenter has asked me to dive into this, quote, problematic episode, unquote. So I'm going to take the time to tell you my well-considered thoughts. Rather than summarize this absurdly, blatantly cringe, pick-me fever dream, I'm going to recount the details pertinent to this commentary. I can't call them plot points because Headland only writes in timeless, non-linear tableaus, which worked to great effect in Russian Doll, but reads completely unhinged in The Acolyte. More on that later. Remember that skulky apothecary guy hitting on the bad twin in previous episodes? Well, it turns out he's a Sith who used to be a Jedi, and he has this fetish with obtaining an apprentice. He wants the power of two. Again, we still don't really know what that means, but don't we? Oh, you mean that power of two? God, give me a break. Anyway, it's clear he has a type that looks like Osha and May. All too convenient that there's a backup for the one who rejected him on the previous episode. Smilo Ren, the stranger, called Khymer, or however you pronounce his name, eliminates a whole flock of Jedi in the name of self-defense, and then he takes the injured and unconscious Osha away to his dwelling on an unknown planet. She wakes up to find herself bandaged and a pot of food on the burner. Osha arms herself with a knife and explores the terrain. Meanwhile, Khymer strolls right past her on his way to bathe, as Paul Chato says, on his way to yoga class. If you aren't subscribed to Chato, do that right away. Link in the description. And this is the important part. Khymer knows Osha is following and watching him. The facts are this. Khymer strips all his clothes off, takes a quick dip in the water, invites her to join him, and when she refuses, he converses with her nude on the shore, using the Force to read her mind. As they walk back to his lair, he verbally makes it clear that she can kill him and or leave at any moment, but I think it's reasonable to suspect that he's still using mind control or at the very least manipulation. Khymer provokes Osha's self-hatred, and at one point, she opens his lightsaber and holds it to his throat. Somehow they get past that, and they chat some more about the Force. Finally, Khymer invites her to try on his Smilo helmet, made of a special metal that allows the wearer to focus on their connection with the Force. While Khymer is out of the room, Osha tries on this helmet. End of episode. Okay, so I really don't know how to put this, so I'm just going to say it. Leslye Headland gives me the creeps. And I mean like literal, actual creeps. The longer I read this interview, the stronger that bad vibe became. In previous interviews, when she has joked about being a Sith, I don't think she was joking. The way she speaks, constantly interrupting herself as if she can hardly finish a sentence, is almost impossible to transcribe. Often she will land on problematic ideas and then bounce off and deflect what she had just said. As The Acolyte has been ripped to shreds by critics and fans alike, she has backtracked, seeming support for this show's strong association with gayness. This clearly undermines her own community so that she can placate who? Exactly? I could forgive her scattered talking if her duplicity wasn't so unsettling. The way she justifies the dark side of the Force and embracing feelings like hate, rage, and lust, the way she justifies the concept of channeling these emotions into self-serving violence and murder is really troubling. Again, I imagine she thinks she's being subversive by writing a show that glorifies the bad guys and demonizes the good guys. First of all, are you suggesting, Ms. Headland, that young women should aspire to romances with sexy murderers? Yeah, that sounds safe and consensual. Second of all, you are not subverting anything. Disney has been turning the bad guy good and the good guy bad since the 2014 release of Maleficent. This is all contrived. At best, the Acolyte is a charcuterie board of stuff chicks liked from the sequels with a side of queerness. At worst, it's actual poorly made propaganda that encourages young people to embrace their dark side and let it lead them to liberation from some feigned oppression. Either way, the show begs to be chosen by the cat ladies as their next binge watch on repeat. Cringe and ham-fisted are cliche terms at this point, so I've moved on to pick me. Collider deputy editor Maggie Lovett literally starts the interview by getting Headland to admit an enemies to lovers plot was always a goal of the show. There's a little bit of debate right now in the fandom about what name we're going to go with for the ship, Lovett says. Ship meaning relationship, imagined between two fictional characters that isn't explicitly defined in a story. They're referring to a hybrid of the characters' names. I like Oshamir, personally, says Headland. If that's not shamelessly begging to be the next Reylo, then I don't know what is. Next, Lovett asks her about inspiration for this enemies to lovers plot point. I wanted to just click into the kind of stuff that I wrote when I was in high school. I love these characters. Nobody wants to ship these characters more than I do. Considering the criticism of her writing has been pointing to the fact that it reads like an earnest 13-year-old wrote it, I can't see how this would help Headland's case for her own work. I'm confounded by the fact that she called The Acolyte the most important piece of work she's done so far. Really? More than Russian Doll? Well, that makes sense. I had a feeling that everything great about Russian Doll came from Natasha Lyonne and Amy Poehler anyway. Headland digs her own grave with these interviews. It's amazing she hasn't been coached on how to shape a narrative. She's constantly saying the quiet part out loud, like the time she told everyone that she pretends that she knows what she's doing.
Young filmmakers, especially young women, ask me, if I want to become a filmmaker, what do I do? I'm always like, when that happens, say yes. Don't say, I don't know how to make a movie, because men don't say that. Dudes roll out of film school, throw on a Spielberg hat, and go, I know everything that I'm doing. And the reality is that you can do it. Like, you just have to have the confidence to walk in there and pretend like you know how to do it. I'm telling you guys, the truth. That's how I made my first film, was that I was like, I know what's going on. I didn't at all. And I think it shows.
Nah, girl, it still shows. And those dudes who rolled out of film school, at least they went to film school instead of relying on their fan fiction from high school to write a multi-million-dollar chapter in a multi-generational franchise. Believe it or not, this article gets so much worse. Headland proceeds to justify all the heavy bending of the Star Wars lore by claiming the story took place so far back in time, she had license to make the Jedi different. Again, the fragmented sentences. They're just not the same Jedi. So, in my opinion and in my experience, and what I was interested in digging into is, it seems like it's a time where you can break down the Jedi as a concept, whereas I wouldn't want to touch what has been established of them a century later. She's trying to place these Headland Jedi in their own time and space. Again, her writing is timeless, placeless, and non sequitur. It is self-admitted fan fiction and should be interpreted as a Star Wars-flavored romance show. Finally, we've found the audience for The Acolyte. And I'm insulted again, because that audience is supposed to be me. There were so many people that were picking up on Reylo parallels between things that happened in The Last Jedi and what's happening here, said Lovett. How many of those parallels are intentional? Headland goes on to confirm that it was completely intentional. This brings us to the Reylo connection. The Reylo connection. Okay. Headland and her writers picked up on Adam Driver's vulnerable performance in The Last Jedi, where he asks Rey to join him on his ill-defined crusade. What isn't mentioned by Headland is the fact that Driver was doing the best he could with massive rewrites that kept shifting his character's motivation, desires, and his very personality. Due to Adam Driver's massive skill as an actor, he was finding an emotional reason for his evil character to change his mind about killing Rey. The Reylo phenomenon is actually a consequence of poor storytelling in the team that created the sequels. Of course, hardcore fans saw this failure for what it was right away. The rest of us were so eager to have a new Star Wars feature film, we were willing to excuse the bad plot and the shocking demise of the main characters. Fans started to fill in the holes on their own, and in forums, make the movies into something they could swallow. Rian Johnson smashed the plot of J.J. Abrams' film, and after getting the ladies all hot and bothered with bare man chest and the lure of a repentant sinner, he walks away for 2 years. In the meantime, Star Wars fans were thoroughly confused, and Carrie Fisher, the only main character still living, died. It was in this vacuum of grief and desire for a cool story that the Reylos popped up. While we were waiting for Lucasfilm to decide how to clean up this mess, we entertained ourselves by projecting this story onto the tropes of romance. Dangerous, forsaken men being tamed and civilized by the beautiful woman. The repressed woman liberated from mundane life by a full expression of her sexual nature and dark energy. Lucasfilm didn't write that. We did. And we were good at it. Of course the men don't get it. It wasn't written for them. And neither is Disney Star Wars. The Rise of Skywalker was a cheap ripoff of everything the Reylos wrote for each other, and none of it makes sense. The Acolyte is just continuing the tradition, and I resent that. Because even cat ladies have standards, and if they don't, they should. You know your studio has a problem when the fans are better storytellers than the showrunners. And you know the symbolism of your screenplay isn't landing when you have to explain all of your creative decisions in lengthy media articles. Let's conclude by refuting Headland's claims about this episode in particular. After watching the episode, it's clear to me that Keimer was manipulating Osha. Setting aside the fact that he kidnapped her, he invited her to be naked with him, read her mind without permission, and made a strong innuendo about desiring an apprentice. Sure, he told her she could leave at any time, and I'm sure there's plenty of casting directors who have said the same thing to the women on their office couches, but just because he says she's free doesn't mean she is. That's not an equal relationship like Ben Solo and Rey. That's what we like to call an unequal power dynamic. Once again, I have to paraphrase Headland because the transcript of her speech is like an avalanche of small toys falling out of a piñata. Just after admitting to stealing the Reylo concept from the fans to make the show, she belittles the idea that Rey sees good in Ben Solo, even though redemption of the villain is a time-honored tradition in Star Wars. Headland wanted the villain to convert her protagonist by validating all the hate and the pain she felt. Someone coming in and saying, actually, feeling all those things is not only okay, but actually could restore your spiritual foundation. I don't think that's manipulation. I think Keimer is telling her the truth. You know, Leslye Headland did confess that this story is based on her own relationships. Something tells me she wants us all to know what redemption feels like when you give in to all of your anger and pain. I'm not sure I want to stick around for that. I may do a final critique of The Acolyte once the season is complete, because I have the feeling that this whole story only included about 45 minutes of real content, and that the ending might reveal a cohesive theme, which I find mildly compelling now that I've invested so much time. It's like watching a plastic butter container melt in a bonfire while avoiding the toxic soot, but I'll do it, if anyone cares by then. Until next time.
Meow.